The morning sun spilled gold over Valencia Street, but Adriana Bennett barely noticed. She was too focused on the small figure across the café. Her 12-year-old daughter Astrid sat alone, sketching maple leaves pressed against the window, her hands still and silent. For 8 years, Adriana had tried to learn her daughter's language, but sign never flowed from her fingers the way business deals did from her mouth. She could negotiate billion-dollar contracts in 5 countries, yet here, with the only person who truly mattered, she was failing. Then, the café bell chimed. A tall man entered with a young boy. Moments later, the man knelt beside Astrid and began moving his hands in graceful arcs. Astrid's eyes lit up. Adriana had never seen her daughter smile like that. Welcome to today's story, a journey filled with emotions, unexpected turns, and lessons worth keeping. If you enjoy stories that touch the heart and make you think, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let us begin. Adriana Bennett was 40 years old and at the top of her game. Her corner office in San Francisco's financial district overlooked a skyline she had helped build. Glass towers rose like monuments to her ambition, their reflections sharp against the clear autumn sky. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive coffee, a scent she associated with winning. She had a reputation for closing deals no one else could touch. Competitors described her as precise, relentless, unstoppable. Yet for all her victories, she carried one private loss that no amount of success could erase. 8 years ago, she had become a single mother overnight. A car accident had taken her husband, leaving her alone with a 2-year-old who, not long after, was diagnosed with a rare neurological condition that stole her voice. Astrid could hear perfectly, but she could not speak. Doctors had been optimistic at first. There were therapies, new devices, and techniques. Adriana had thrown herself into the challenge, determined to master sign language. But the graceful fluidity of a native signer always eluded her. Conversations with Astrid often dissolved into guesswork and frustration, each failed exchange deepening the distance between them. That Saturday morning began like any other, until her assistant, Gwen, reminded her of a promise. Adriana had agreed to take Astrid to breakfast at a new café on Valencia Street. Her instinct was to cancel. A Japanese investor was waiting for her call. A board member had been questioning her focus, but something in Gwen's voice made her pause. "The board will still be here Monday," Gwen said. "Your daughter's childhood will not." So, Adriana surprised Astrid by appearing in her doorway in jeans and a sweater, instead of her usual tailored suit. Astrid looked up from her sketchpad, startled. Her mother rarely dressed down, and rarer still did she keep personal plans. "Ready for our breakfast date?" Adriana signed slowly, concentrating on each movement. Astrid's face brightened, her smile warm as sunlight after rain. She grabbed her purple backpack, covered in painted butterflies, and followed her mother out the door. The café was warm and bustling, alive with the smell of fresh espresso and cinnamon rolls. Sunlight filtered through stained glass-colored leaves pressed against the windows. Astrid sat at a corner table by the glass, sketchpad open, her pencil tracing the curves of a maple leaf drifting outside. Adriana went to order, glancing back often. She noticed how small her daughter looked at that big table, surrounded by families laughing, sharing stories. Astrid's silence was like an invisible wall between her and the world. The café bell chimed. A tall man entered with a boy who looked about 6. The boy's sandy hair stuck out in every direction, and he clutched a stuffed triceratops with one arm. The man wore worn jeans and a flannel shirt, his glasses catching the morning light. Before Adriana could react, the boy wandered to Astrid's table, curious about her drawing. The man followed, his movements unhurried. Instead of speaking, his hands began to move in a rhythm Adriana had never mastered. Fluid, confident, alive. Astrid looked up, then her hands began to fly. No hesitation, no searching for the right sign. She told him about the leaves, comparing them to snowflakes and fingerprints. Adriana froze at the counter, watching her daughter communicate with ease she had never seen before. The man's expressions matched his hands, his eyebrows rising in question, his mouth shaping silent words that gave meaning to his gestures. When Adriana returned, the man said in a warm, faintly southern voice, "I am Elias Bennett. This is Oliver. I hope you do not mind them joining Astrid." He explained that his mother had taught at the California School for the Deaf for 30 years, and he had grown up signing before he could talk. His words carried no judgment, only understanding. Astrid leaned closer to Oliver, showing him how to sign the word leaf. The boy repeated it, grinning when she nodded in approval. Adriana felt a pang deep in her chest. She had spent years trying to give her daughter this connection, and here it was, unfolding naturally between strangers in a café. Halfway through her coffee, she caught herself thinking, this man and his son just gave Astrid something I could not. And what she discovered next would challenge everything she thought she knew about being a good mother. Elias mentioned the Saturday morning family ASL class almost in passing. Parents and children learned together. No pressure, just a community space to practice. Astrid's hands stilled for a moment as she looked at her mother, eyes bright with hope. Adriana smiled politely, but felt the weight of her phone in her bag. 3 missed calls from the office, 2 from board members, a text from Gwen. Henderson is pushing for an emergency meeting. The corporate storm was building. Marcus Henderson, her most ambitious board member, had been hinting to investors that her focus was slipping. She knew this was ammunition for him. But when she looked back at Astrid, leaning forward in deep conversation with Elias, the noise of her phone seemed far away. Still, by Monday morning, reality came crashing in. Headlines appeared in tech blogs, absent CEO seen at café. Photos of her and Astrid at the table. Henderson was quoted questioning her commitment. Investors called for reassurances. The Yamamoto deal, which represented nearly half of their expansion funding, was suddenly shaky. Gwen dropped a folder of crisis strategies on Adriana's desk. The safe choice was clear. Cancel personal commitments, double down on damage control. But Gwen said something that caught her off guard. You could fix the optics, or you could fix the reality. Which one matters more to Astrid? That question stayed with her all week. On Saturday morning, Adriana drove to the Mission District, heart pounding. The community center was painted with murals of hands forming signs, bright colors against weathered brick. Inside, families gathered in a semicircle. Children darted between parents, laughter filling the air. The smell of fresh pastries from a side table mixed with the faint scent of paint from art projects drying nearby. Elias stood at the front, setting up a whiteboard covered in diagrams of signing space. Oliver was tangled in a banner that read, "Every voice matters, even silent ones." When Elias saw Adriana and Astrid, his smile was immediate and genuine, like sunlight cutting through morning fog. Class began with simple warm-ups, introducing yourself, describing your favorite food, but soon shifted into something more dynamic. Elias demonstrated that ASL was not English on the hands, but a spatial language, alive with facial grammar and movement. Adriana struggled at first, her hands stiff, her expressions too restrained. But Astrid was in her element. She signed with speed and precision, raising her eyebrows for questions, leaning forward for emphasis. She even corrected her mother gently, guiding her hand placement with patience Adriana had rarely seen from her. Midway through, Elias called for a break. Children clustered together, swapping drawings and snacks. Then something unexpected happened. Astrid tapped the table sharply, the way she had seen Elias do. The chatter quieted, all eyes turning to her. She began organizing a game called Silent Story Circle. Each person would add one signed sentence to create a shared story. The rules were strict. Use classifiers to show size and movement, keep spatial references consistent, and incorporate facial expressions as part of the grammar. Adriana watched her daughter command the group with ease. When a younger boy struggled to form a classifier for bird, Astrid knelt beside him, shaping her flat hand into wings, showing how to change speed and height to show the bird's path. His grin when he got it right made her heart swell. It struck Adriana then. Astrid was not missing a voice. She had one all along. The problem was that Adriana had never learned to truly listen to it. After class, families lingered in the lobby, reluctant to leave the warmth of shared understanding. Elias walked over, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "She is a natural teacher," he said, watching Astrid help another child. "Look at how she adjusts her signing speed depending on who she is talking to. She builds confidence in others. That is not easy to teach." Adriana nodded, her throat tight. "I have been so afraid of her being hurt that I kept her in a bubble," she admitted. "Just the 2 of us." "Fear makes us do that," Elias replied. "When Oliver's mom died, I barely left the house for 6 months. I thought keeping him close meant keeping him safe, but it also meant keeping him from living." They stood there for a long moment, the hum of conversation and laughter around them. Then Oliver ran up, tugging at Elias's hand, and Astrid followed, holding a sketch pad with a drawing of the 4 of them under a tree. Adriana looked down at it, herself, Astrid, Elias, and Oliver. The lines simple, but filled with something she could not deny. Halfway through that drive home, she realized this was not just about sign language anymore. It was about breaking the walls she had built for herself and for Astrid. And what she decided next would force her to risk everything, not only in her career, but in her heart. Monday arrived with a hard gray sky and wind off the bay. The city felt metallic and cold. Adriana stepped from the elevator into a boardroom that smelled of glass cleaner and tension. Screens glowed. Folders were stacked like barricades. Faces turned toward her with polite impatience. Marcus Henderson began without ceremony. Charts flashed, headlines scrolled. The narrative was simple: a distracted leader, a wobbling stock, investors demanding clarity. The air hummed like a server room. Every breath tasted recycled. Adriana listened. She kept her hands still on the polished table. She noted the restless tapping of pens. She noted the faint whir of the projector fan. She noted her pulse, steady but loud in her ears. She had spent years mastering this arena. Today felt different. Today, the arena was her life. Gwen sat near the end, calm as stone. Her presence steadied the room. A video tile glowed with a Tokyo conference line. Yamamoto's team waited, patient and silent. The city stretched beyond the glass like a challenge. Adriana stood. She did not open a deck. She did not stack more charts. She let a slow breath expand her ribs. She began with the truth that hurt. Fear had shaped her leadership. Fear had shaped her parenting. Fear had built walls that looked like strength. She shifted her stance. Space matters in communication. She had learned that from hands, not from books. She placed market segments in physical space as she spoke. She located tenants here. She located regulators there. She placed partners between them, slightly forward, angled for collaboration. Her gestures were clean, spare, and intentional. Her face carried grammar. Her eyes marked emphasis. She turned numbers into locations. Complexity became visible. Accessibility appeared as a field, not a bolt-on feature. She described visual fire alarms as standard, not premium. She described videophone lobbies as default, not add-ons. She mapped sightlines across common areas so conversations could cross rooms without sound. She pointed to new tenant pools. She referenced premium occupancy rates. She showed how inclusion was not charity. It was design intelligence. It was competitive advantage. A murmur shifted along the table. The projector fans seemed less loud. Pens stopped tapping. The air felt warmer, like a door had cracked open. Midway through, she placed herself in the plan. Leadership would change. Saturday mornings were now sacred for families in her portfolio. Property teams would learn visual protocols. Her own calendar would model that boundary. She would no longer mistake noise for value. She would no longer mistake speed for wisdom. But what happened next would decide whether vision became policy or faded as theater. Marcus leaned back. His face stayed impassive. He asked about risk. He asked about cost curves. He asked about codes and timelines. She answered with numbers from pilot surveys. She answered with phased retrofits. She answered with partnership letters drafted over disciplined evenings. She answered with grace, but she did not apologize. The Tokyo tile brightened. Yamamoto spoke through an interpreter with measured cadence. He referenced resilience. He referenced bending without breaking. He endorsed the vision with conditional capital. The conditions were not punitive. The conditions were building blocks. Implementation milestones. Community partnerships. Leadership continuity. Silence followed. It did not feel empty. It felt full, like a held breath. Marcus closed his folder. The reaction in the room softened. Heads inclined. Several members proposed a vote. The motion passed with clear support. The word pilot shifted to initiative. The word optics vanished. The word future replaced it. Adriana felt heat behind her eyes. She did not let it fall. She thanked the board. She thanked the team. She did not linger. She had somewhere more important to be. Outside, the wind had softened and smelled faintly of rain. She drove with the windows cracked. The air tasted clean. Her hands felt lighter on the wheel. The Mission District murals appeared ahead, bright and worn. The community center door stuck for a second, then yielded with a low groan. Inside, the room buzzed with weekend energy. Paper rustled. A coffee urn steamed. Children clustered around a low table covered in markers and small wooden blocks. Astrid stood in the center, guiding a group through a signing game. Her movements were confident and playful. Her eyebrows lifted for questions. Her shoulders softened for reassurance. Her face was grammar and invitation. Elias arranged visual aids along a whiteboard. He glanced over and saw Adriana near the doorway. Relief crossed his features, warm and unguarded. She felt its echo in her chest. She stepped forward. She joined a small circle of parents practicing introductions. Her hands moved slowly at first, then smoother. Astrid noticed and gave the smallest nod, proud and private. The room smelled of dry erase marker and cinnamon pastry. Laughter rippled like water through reeds. A toddler clapped off beat. A mother corrected her own hand shape and grinned. A father leaned back to see a sign from across the room. The space held many languages. None needed sound to be real. During break, Adriana wiped a faint smear of ink from her finger. Old habits urged her to check her phone. She did not. She watched Astrid help a younger boy understand classifiers for vehicles. 2 fingers walked to show a person. A flat hand became a speeding car. The boy tried, then tried again. Success bloomed across his face. Astrid mirrored his smile with quiet pride. This was the moment she had missed for years. The voice had been present all along. She had been translating it into noise. Now she let it be what it was: clear, visual, whole. But the next moment would change not just a day, it would change a life. A weekend in the mountains had been planned for class families. Several could not go. An extra tent was available. The invitation moved through the room like a friendly rumor. Astrid watched Adriana with cautious hope. Oliver bounced on his toes and tried to stay respectful. Elias waited without pressure, hands still, eyes kind. Adriana weighed calendars in her mind out of habit. Then she set the scale down. She said yes with action. She blocked the days. She sent a brief note to Gwen with tasks and authority. She reserved space for something larger than efficiency. The choice felt like cool water after a long run. They drove out at dawn 2 days later. Fog clung to the bay like gauze. The highway curved toward pines and granite. The car smelled of trail mix and new canvas. Astrid traced pictures on the window with a fingertip, then turned to practice signs for animals. Oliver invented names for clouds. The road climbed, the city fell away. The campsite greeted them with resin and damp earth. The air felt thinner and cleaner. Elias unfolded poles with practiced ease. Adriana wrestled a stubborn joint that refused to lock. Laughter lifted from both children like birds. The tent finally rose, not perfect, but standing. Imperfect and standing felt exactly right. Evening brought a sky brushed with lavender. A small fire hissed and popped. The pan heated too fast. The first attempt at dinner darkened beyond saving. Smoke tasted bitter on the tongue. Water sizzled in the pan and calmed the heat. The second attempt worked. The first bite tasted simple and good. Hunger made it better. Crickets began their thin fiddles. A breeze lifted the edge of a blanket. Stars appeared one by one. Astrid and Oliver whispered with hands from inside the tent, shapes outlined by lantern light. The canvas glowed like a soft moon. Adriana and Elias sat beside the embers. The silence felt generous, not strained. She thought about walls and doors. She thought about language and presence. She thought about the boardroom and this clearing and how both required courage. She did not speak. She let the courage sit between them like a third truth. Elias understood without asking. Understanding could be quiet. Understanding could be shared warmth against cooling air. A shooting star stitched the sky. The fire settled to coals. The night held. What she realized then would guide every choice that followed, at home and at work. The strongest structure was not a fortress. It was a bridge. Morning in the mountains came with the sound of wind moving through pines. The air was cold enough to make breath visible. Adriana unzipped the tent and stepped into light filtered through branches, golden and sharp. The ground was soft with pine needles. A pot of coffee sat on the camp stove, its scent deep and grounding. Elias was teaching Oliver how to tie a knot that would hold even in a storm. Astrid stood nearby, her hair messy, her hands flying as she retold a dream from the night before. Oliver's responses were quick, full of laughter. For years, Adriana had measured her worth in buildings and numbers. Here, there were no contracts, no quarterly reports, only the crisp air on her skin and her daughter's voice. Not in sound, but in light and movement. Back in San Francisco, life resumed, but the rhythm was different. Saturday mornings at the community center became untouchable. Even when Tokyo requested weekend calls, she said no. The class had become their anchor. Astrid began to teach her mother inside jokes in ASL. They built a shared vocabulary of visual puns that could make them both laugh silently in crowded rooms. Adriana learned how a tilt of the head could change meaning, how the height of a sign could show age or importance, how the speed of movement could be as sharp as anger or as slow as tenderness. Elias noticed the changes. At work, so did her team. During a crucial merger negotiation, Adriana used spatial referencing in her presentation without thinking, placing each company in a position in the air, referring back to them with gestures. It was clear, memorable, and unexpectedly persuasive. Her CFO told her afterward, "You are different now, more dimensional." Weeks later, they returned to the mountains for another trip. The nights were colder this time, but the children had grown bold, building small fires under Elias's guidance. Astrid taught Oliver a new game, a silent scavenger hunt where clues were signed instead of spoken. Watching them run between trees, Adriana felt the quiet satisfaction of something mending. Then came the moment Elias asked her to take the next step. They were in her kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counter, the smell of bread warming in the oven. "Move in with us," he said, his voice steady. "Or let us move in with you. You and Astrid are not just part of our lives. You are our life." The move was messy in all the best ways. Boxes everywhere. Astrid and Oliver turning unpacking into a game. The big Pacific Heights house, once too large and silent, now rang with footsteps and laughter. Evenings were spent cooking together, signing across the table, telling stories without raising voices. Months passed. Their life wove itself into something strong. Astrid became a mentor at the community center, teaching younger children not just the language, but the confidence to use it. Oliver painted murals that celebrated hands in motion. Adriana's company adopted her inclusive design initiative fully, earning recognition far beyond the industry. And then, one Saturday morning, Elias surprised her. The center was full of families, the air alive with movement and color. Elias knelt on one knee, hands steady, signing his proposal while Astrid and Oliver held a banner that read, "Say yes." Her yes was signed, spoken, and laughed through tears, the room around them erupting in visual applause, hands waving like leaves in a warm wind. They married in the botanical garden the following spring. Cherry blossoms drifted down like soft confetti. Astrid and Oliver stood as witnesses. Adriana signed her vows and spoke them, her hands and voice in perfect unison. 5 years moved quickly. Astrid graduated high school as valedictorian, delivering her speech in ASL and through an interpreter. She spoke about communication beyond words, about family being a choice you make every day. "The woman who taught me to find my voice never made a sound," she signed, looking at her mother. Love needs no words, only the willingness to learn each other's language. In the front row, Elias squeezed Adriana's hand, both of them crying without shame. Oliver, now 16, signed his pride from beside them. Even Marcus Henderson, once her fiercest critic, approached after the ceremony. "My grandson is deaf," he said quietly. "I never understood until now." Adriana told him to bring the boy to the center. "Saturday mornings?" she said. "We will be there. They always were." Elias taught. Adriana assisted. Astrid mentored. Oliver painted. The center walls became a living record of connection, covered in murals and photographs of hands speaking volumes. One afternoon, a young couple came in with their shy daughter. She hid behind her mother's legs, unsure of this new world. Before Adriana could welcome them, Astrid was there, kneeling. showing the girl how her hands could tell stories. The child's eyes widened, her small fingers copying each motion. It is going to be better. Then okay? Adriana told the parents. She will show you a whole new world. Outside, the day was bright, the air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. Astrid gathered a group of kids for an impromptu signing choir. Oliver stood nearby, conducting with theatrical flair. Adriana watched as language moved like music through the air. She turned to Elias. "I love you," she signed. "We love you too," he signed back, their children joining in unison. The stars came out that night, the same stars that had shone on their first camping trip, their wedding, their quiet moments of choice. Astrid gestured around the garden and signed, "We are home." Home was not walls or location. It was understanding. It was choosing each other every day. Tomorrow would bring change. Astrid leaving for Gallaudet University to teach, Oliver heading to CalArts. But tonight, they were 4 people bound by the same language. "Thank you," Astrid signed to them both, "for learning my language, for showing me that family is about showing up and staying." Adriana signed back, steady and sure. "Thank you for teaching us that love needs no words, only the willingness to learn each other's languages." They walked out together into a future bright with possibility, fluent in the only vocabulary that truly, thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please share it and leave your thoughts in the comments below.